You're watching 1313 Mockingbird Lane, a vintage Halloween playlist crawl. It begins here in Philly with me, Monica of Up All Night DIY. Then we'll head on out to the Midwest to see what Magic Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling whips up for us before we head down to sunny Miami to sit for a spell with Indiana Jones. We've conjured up some fun, spooky, vintage-inspired DIYs. I'm making a German folk art style Halloween black cat. Let's get into it. So I'm using a 2.8 and a 2.3 inch styrofoam ball, some Model Magic clay, and a couple of toothpicks. The first thing I'm going to do is cut a flat spot on the top and bottom of both balls. This is so that the balls will stack nicely and so the bottom one won't roll away. Next I'll grab a handful of clay and I'll knead it a wee bit before I roll it flat with my brayer. I want it pancake thin, and I'm going to cover both balls completely. I just wrap the clay around the ball, pressing it into the foam for good contact. I'll fill in any bare spots with pieces of clay, and I'll roll the ball on the table and in my hands to smooth it out, best I can. Not looking for perfection, just want it to be somewhat smooth. You feel me? I like there to be some bumps in texture to these items because I think it, really adds to their handmade quality and gives them more of a vintage feel. And here I'm rolling it, again, trying to get it somewhat smooth. And I'm going to do the exact same thing to the small ball. I roll out a thin cane of clay. We're going to need that in a minute. But first we'll attach the two balls with a couple of toothpicks. I'm just going to push them into the big one, and I'll slide the little one right on top. Now I'll grab that cane, and I'm going to use it to seal the gap between the head and body. And I'm pressing it in with my thumb. I'll use my clay tool to incorporate it into the clay on the balls. A paintbrush handle works well for this too. To make his arms, I'll roll a thick cane of clay. And I just had somebody ask me this. To keep the cane uniform in size, I move my hand along the length while I'm rolling, and that usually does it. So when I'm happy with the length and width, I'll cut it in half lengthwise. Yeah, that's a wee longer than I want, so I'll cut about an inch off each arm. And I'm going to round out that edge on both. Just use my fingers to pinch it together. I push my arms into place, and I'm shaping them as I go. This clay sticks really well to itself with very little pressure. So once again, I'll incorporate the clay, rolling my handle over the area where the arm meets the body. Okay, I've rolled a ball of clay, which I'll now roll into a cane. I'll slightly taper one end. This is going to be his hat. When I'm happy with the size and shape, I'll attach it with a toothpick. And you guessed it, I'll incorporate it into the clay on his head. I've rolled another ball, and I'm going to cut it in half, and I'll cut it in half again. These will be his ears. They're kind of already that shape, triangular, so this works perfectly. Very little shaping needed to be done. I placed them on his head, working the clay into the other clay, just like before. I'll cut another piece right off the very corner of that other half ball of clay, because, it'll still have that triangular shape. So this is going to be his nose, and it's really only going to need a wee tweak to shape it before popping it into place. And of course, we'll incorporate it. Yeah, he's starting to look like something. To create his mouth, I rolled a really thin cane. I want him to have a wide grin, so I'll stretch the ends of the cane almost from ear to ear. Not quite, but almost. I'll add his bottom lip just below, meeting at the corners, and I'll lightly press them together. I'm going to set him aside to dry overnight. Meanwhile, back in the lab, we'll work on his holder. I bought this tapered metal vase at Dollar Tree and I spray painted it matte black. I'm marking off some tapered stripes that I cut from vinyl to fit around the vase and its base. I used my silhouette to cut these out, and this is just regular old, shelf liner from Target. This vase reminded me of like a metal party horn. I'm using a cosmetic sponge to pounce on some white acrylic paint to the exposed areas before pouncing another layer of AMERICANA spiced pumpkin on top of that. Before the paint is completely dry, I'll peel away the vinyl. I was really pleased how crisp these stripes are. There are a few spots on the bottom that need touching up, but otherwise, they were really crisp. I'll brush on a mix of CERAMCOAT Drizzle Grey and Floating Medium very loosely to add some age to the vase. Then I'm going to come back and hit it with some white too, focusing mostly on the edges with the white. Then I'm going to spray it with a clear matte sealer. Our cat is dry and ready to paint. So I'll start by giving his teeth 2 coats of white, then I'll move on to his hat and his body. I'm using CERAMCOAT white, and as always, I will have a list of all my paints and supplies in the description box for you. His face and hands will get 2 coats of CERAMCOAT black, and I'm going to leave his nose and his mouth as they are just for the moment. I'm just doing about an inch off the bottom of the arms for his hands. The rest of it will be his sleeve. And as usual, it'll get 2 coats. Right, let's paint in his eyes. I'm going to base coat them white before filling them in with CERAMCOAT Apple Green. Here I'm just using my liner brush to outline them, before I fill them in. And here I'm giving them 2 coats of the apple green. I'm using CERAMCOAT charcoal to dot in his pupils, giving him the side eye. Dot in some white highlights. While the highlights dry, I'll paint his lips. I'm using AMERICANA Warm Sunset here. And we'll add some to the inside of his ears. And you know what? Let's add some swoops to his eyes too. I outline his eyes with Warm Sunset as well. And eyebrows and character lines too. I fill in his wee nose with CERAMCOAT Bittersweet Orange. And I did want to mention that Annie, Dawn, and myself all have 2 videos in this playlist. First is the new video with our new DIY, and then we're doing flashback videos for the last 3. Please be sure to stay tuned. You're going to love it. Continuing with that German folk art vibe, I'll outline his ears with Drizzle Grey, and I'm going to give him some whiskers too. Gonna highlight his eyebrows with some drizzle too. And for my buddy Terry, I'm gonna give him Hippo Grey teeth. Just simple little lines. Hear that, Terry? Just for you. I'll add a rain gray ring around his hat and around his cuffs. I'll paint some Harlequin diamonds on his belly. I'm using CERAMCOAT charcoal for this. They're wonky, but that's okay. I'm just going to lean into that. I'm going to outline around the Harlequin too. Now let's add a bittersweet orange ring to the cuffs and the hat. I'm going to smatter on some charcoal dots to his hat and then some bittersweet orange dots to the harlequin. I'll mix up a wash with floating medium and rain gray. I'll load my brush with the medium first, then I'll pull some paint from the puddle and I'm going to mix it up on my plate. I'll apply the wash and wipe it back with a paper towel. I want the color to pool into the crevices of his arms, to give it an aged appearance, and in any wee bump or dip too. I always start off light and build up the color by adding more layers. The good thing about making the wash with floating medium is that if the paint is too heavy in one area, I can go over it with just the medium on a paintbrush, and it will lift the color. Love my floating medium. So as you can see, I'm applying it all over him and wiping it all back. I really felt like he needed something to hold, so I painted a wee jack-o'-lantern to glue into his hands. I'm using 3-in-1 glue and a dot of hot glue to attach it. Now I'll pounce on a layer of Mod Podge to seal this fella. To give his hat a finished look, I'll glue a black pipe cleaner around the base. And I have a length of black tinsel rope for his neck, and I'm going to go around twice with the tinsel rope. All we need to do is add this wee vinyl sticker that I made on my silhouette to the front of the vase. To display him, I'll stuff some shredded paper into the vase and sit him on top of it. Just pop him right on top. Here's a look at him, all finished and Halloweeny. He actually turned out far better than I thought. I hope you like this vintage Halloween black cat. All supplies are listed in the description box. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling is up next on the playlist crawl, then on to Indiana Jones, before I return with another flashback project. Stay tuned. You're watching 1313 Mockingbird Lane, a vintage Halloween playlist crawl.